Hello, I'm ahead of the curve, and today I will be reviewing Freedom from the Known, written by Jiddu Krishnamurti, and this was published in 1969. Krishnamurti didn't actually publish this book himself. He got one of his friends, his associates, to do it for him, and his request was to compile his orations and other shorter writings into one accessible book. And this is indeed what we got out of it. A very short but punchy piece of writing. So the reason I'm reviewing this book, out of all the other kind of self-help spiritual pieces that I've read before, is that I feel like I should give it justice. This is because it is one of the better books of its kind. There are many books that preach spirituality and this whole kind of self-help charade that's going on these days, all these kind of books, an influx of them coming from all sorts of musicians and artists and even laymen, to be honest. You know, even the most average individuals are writing pieces of self-help. And so, for me at least, because I've read quite a few, there are definitely those at the bottom of the barrel that are mediocre, and those such as, I believe, this one, that actually does the job adequately and to the extent of which you can finish reading and you really feel like you've taken in something that you should apply in your life. So the contents, the subjects that are discussed throughout, there are many of them, but some of them range from religion, love, existence, meaning, fear, happiness, politics, humanism. There are so many topics throughout, and even when I look at the chapters themselves are they're not even names of the chapters, they're just man's search, the tortured mind, the traditional approach, the trap of respectability, the human being and the individual, the battle of existence, consciousness, the totality of life, awareness, pursuit of pleasure, desire, perversion of thought, memory, joy, self-concern, violence, anger. There are so many themes throughout the book. And I think this is why it is so good compared to other pieces like this, because it's got so much content that you'll walk away having felt that at least there was something that probably connected to you from reading the text. So it's not just one topic, it is many. And Krishnamurti was a very wise man. We can see this from all the writings and orations he gave in his life. And in this book, it's basically just a path through the mind of this man and all of his knowledge on different subjects and topics throughout life. So for that reason as well, I think it's a very worthwhile read. But basically, there are a few recurring themes such as love, fear, happiness. These are themes that kind of come up again and again. One thing I will say that is a detriment to the book is how repetitive it can feel sometimes. And this is because obviously he's talking about many themes, and for example, with the theme of love, there might be some fear in there, some violence, some suffering. So these subjects intertwine with each other. So that is one reason why it can feel repetitive at times, and I didn't mind it too much. It's not heavily repetitive, but it's just a disclaimer. There are many different perceptions of the subjects that are discussed throughout. Krishnamurti states different ways of which you can see one topic, such as hate, love, violence. And in that sense, it's not repetitive, but it also is, because he's still talking about the same thing a few chapters on. But it's still interesting. So as per usual, I think I'll read a few quotes from the book just to give you a taste of the style of his writing and to see if it's something that you'd feel interested in reading for yourself. When you call yourself an Indian or a Muslim or a Christian or a European or anything else, you are being violent. Do you see why it is violent? Because you are separating yourself from the rest of mankind. When you separate yourself by belief, by nationality, by tradition, it breeds violence. So a man who is seeking to understand violence does not belong to any country, to any religion, to any political party or partial system. He is concerned with the total understanding of mankind. So this is a really interesting point that I find to be somewhat controversial, because a religious individual would probably not agree here, but I think you can understand or at least recognise what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that labels negate our individuality. They separate us from others. We should think of ourselves as a collection of individuals hoping to derive the best from humanity or to influence the world in a good way. And so if we separate ourselves by putting ourselves into boxes such as I'm an Indian, I'm a Christian, I'm a philosopher or a teacher, you are in some sense alienating yourself from particular sects of humans because they might seem to be incompatible with one another. Have you ever noticed that when you respond to something totally, with all your heart, there is very little memory? Anything that is a result of memory is old, and therefore never free. There is no such thing as freedom of thought. Thought is never new, for thought is the response of memory, experience, knowledge. So, once again, as the Eastern philosophic doctrine usually tries to put forward, he's saying that one has to live fully in the present or fully in an idea to comprehend the subject for itself truthfully and clearly. So the idea is to remove bias from your thought, to separate this bias from the intrinsic thing that you recognize within a word, within an emotion, within yourself. It is in some sense similar to the idea of the ego that Freud puts forward in his theories of psychoanalysis. And when he says thought is never new, that is true, because you can't think of something that you don't know exists. You can't think of a colour that you've never seen before. You can't imagine the taste of a flavour that you've never even experienced. So he's basically highlighting how once an experience is taken in, it never truly escapes from our mind. Violence is not merely killing another. It is violence when we use a sharp word, when we make a gesture to brush away a person, when we obey because there is fear. Violence is much more subtle, much deeper, and we are inquiring to the very depths of violence. So if you've watched my review of Slavoj Žižek's book Violence, then you may find yourself to think of such, because Žižek was also writing about violence within words, within subtle passive aggressiveness. And this is something that the modern world and people seem to adopt very abundantly, because violence isn't so much physical anymore. It is more of a subtlety, an idea, a metaphor. It is a behaviour that is invisible to the eye, but perceived through intuition, let's say. So it is arguably an even deeper and more intrinsic violence that we are delving into, because if this violence is invisible to us, then how do we counter it? How do we move on beyond this mode of violence? So to conclude, this book is extremely rereadable and so very quotable. And this is one reason why I loved it so much when I read it, because I was literally underlining nearly every page. There is so much gold to find within these pages and these words. But anyway, I must end this here. So thank you very much for watching. Remember to check out the description for all my social media and my Patreon. And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.